Welcome, and thank you for joining us for what I assure you will be a fun and thought-provoking panel. My name is Jasmine Park, and I'm a policy fellow for youth and education privacy at the Future Privacy Forum, a DC-based nonprofit. We are here today to discuss youth privacy, also known as child privacy. We chose to use youth to be inclusive of young people in their teens who may no longer identify as children. As many of you are aware, youth privacy is an area that regulators, companies, parents, young people themselves are paying close attention to and have strong opinions about. Some of the questions up for debate include: what is the age of a child? Should youth be protected through a consent-based or rights-based framework? In a consent-based framework, who should provide consent, the young person or their parents? And should youth privacy be addressed in comprehensive national legislation or through a sector-based approach? We are seeing significant movement in answering these questions around the globe with new policies, standards, fundamentals, and regulations. However, there has been an absence of the voices of the most important stakeholders in this case, young people themselves. This panel really seeks to bridge that gap, bringing together the academic and policy perspectives with young youth voices to dive into how youth privacy policies being debated and developed internationally can be shaped in a way that respects and prioritizes the opinions of those they hope to protect and empower. I am honored to be joined by young actors and the co-creator of a production called Wildlife FM that did a brilliant job at sharing what it's like to be young today. Meghan is a student at the University of Exeter, and she just found out today that she's studying in Amsterdam next semester for a year. So congratulations, Meghan. We also have Mikey, who's studying psychology at London South Bank University and is a prominent member of the Wildlife cast. And also, Mikey is not destined. And I have Kim's bio. I'm just going to give a little bit of a warning that there may be some content warnings with this introduction, but Kim Noble is an award-winning comedic performance and video artist and also a part-time cleaner. There is a female Kim Noble who is also an artist and has more followers than Kim, but her paintings are shit. According to Kim, I'm not going to clarify which one. He co-directed a young people show called Wildlife FM, which is the main reason he's with us here today. Amelia Vance is Director of Youth and Education Privacy at the Future Privacy Forum and also my boss. She advises policymakers, academics, companies, districts, and states on youth and student privacy laws and best practices. She also oversees the Student Privacy Compass, a one-stop shop for U.S. student privacy resources, and the Student Privacy Pledge 2020, a legally binding set of commitments by companies to safeguard student privacy. Amelia has testified before the U.S. Congress, presented for the U.S. Department of Education and Federal Trade Commission, serves on the OECD expert group currently reviewing the draft recommendations on children in the digital environment. Basically, she's everywhere and does everything. Finally, we have Sonia Livingstone, Order of the British Empire, professor in the Department of Media and Communications at the London School of Economics and Political Science, and, if I may say so, the world's preeminent scholar on youth privacy. She has published 20 books, including Parenting for a Digital Future, and directs a number of projects, including the Digital Futures Commission with Five Rights Foundation, Children's Data and Privacy Online, funded by the UK's ICO, and Global Kids Online with UNICEF. She's advised the European Commission, European Parliament, Council of Europe, ITU, OECD, and others on children's rights and risks in a digital age, including most recently the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child. So unfortunately, we will not have a time for Q&A at the end, but I encourage you to reach out to us if you have further questions. So I'm just going to get started. Amelia, could you share with us how youth privacy is being protected around the world? What are existing or emerging policies and protection strategies that we should be paying attention to?
Thanks so much, Jasmine, and really, really excited for this panel. I think we're all going to have a lot of fun, and not just because I love geeking out, talking about youth and student privacy. So we're in a major point of flux in the laws that deal with child and student privacy. You have a general agreement across multiple countries that existing safeguards aren't quite working. You have, restrictions that either end up keeping kids offline or lying about their age to access content. You have concern about sort of laws that are based entirely on parents or youth themselves consenting to using, various websites, when of course we all know that it is rare that people actually dive in and read the terms of service and approve of all of the uses. And of course, as children are especially vulnerable, that's a big concern for folks. And so you have a lot of legislation that's aimed at trying to deal with a number of risks. So legislators have been concerned with, age inappropriate content and figuring out how to deal with preventing kids from accessing content that may not be appropriate for them at whatever age they're at. There's concern about predators and how we make sure that kids are safe as they're navigating the internet. Cyberbullying, kids being profiled. So whether, advertisers, whether, data brokers that may be compiling information on everyone generally on the internet to sell them something, to personalize an experience. And there's a feeling of nervousness about this from a lot of parents and legislators, since, of course, how children experience the world, their interest and all of that doesn't fully sort of setting quite as much their likes and their dislikes. And there's a feeling that kids should have a blank slate that they can lean on in the future, that what they do online as a child should not impact them later on. And then there's concerns about specifically targeted marketing related to that, about screen time, about normalizing surveillance in kids that are particularly young. And so what we've seen is a discussion in the US, where I'm based, about how to reform the Children's Online Privacy Protection Act, COPPA, as well as perhaps new federal and state laws in the student privacy space, where I spend a great deal of my time. We've seen over 130 laws passed in more than 40 states, aimed at figuring out the right balance of protections to allow schools to function, but also to ensure that data turned over in the course of the education is not used for inappropriate purposes. Internationally, in the EU, it was a big deal for those working on child privacy, because you saw GDPR providing special protections for youth, requiring, verifiable parental consent in Article 8, child-friendly language and notices in Article 12, and for children's rights and freedoms to override data controllers' interests when processing children's data in Article 6. And you've seen a lot of variations in implementation. I think most prominently and most interestingly, we saw the UK's age-appropriate design code, which goes into effect in September this year. Should be interesting. The Irish Data Protection Commissioner's new draft fundamentals for a child-oriented approach to data processing was released for consultation in December. Germany has been bringing more and more together with, most recently, the Interstate Treaty on the Protection of Minors in the Media, requiring online providers to self-assess whether their content is problematic for youth. And perhaps most recently, the Italian DPA ordering TikTok to block the accounts of any users that it could not verify the ages of in Italy after a 10-year-old girl died participating in a blackout challenge on the app. And this is just a few countries. We've also seen in Asia, India's personal data protection bill. South America, you have Brazil's LGPD, which came into effect in September 2020, requires verifiable parental consent. In Australia, you have a specific e-safety commissioner who is highly active in providing resources for youth and parents on how to engage safely and responsibly online in a way that protects youth privacy. So things are changing fast, and it hasn't quite been settled what the right balance is to give kids autonomy and access to the internet while still making sure that they're protected as their brains evolve and they grow up.
Mhm. Yeah, so one of the questions that are up for debate, a key issue in youth privacy at the moment, is what ages should receive greater privacy protections. We see a range of ages in the policies and regulations that you just mentioned. Also, there's a question of who should own these privacy rights, who has the right to consent, and what are you seeing in that space?
So globally, the digital age of consent is ranging right now really between 13 and 18 years old. Often parents own the right, basically, to consent of kids under the age of 13 for sure. And then it varies from country to country about whether parents are able to consent on behalf of teens. In the US, COPPA applies to children under 13. But new federal bills, state legislation, like California's new law, proposes different ages, allowing for teen rights as well. And then GDPR allows member states to determine their own ages between 13 and 16 years old. But some countries like India and Brazil are defaulting to under the age of 18.
Justin, how is it? Look, I've been asked to be part of a panel on about privacy and youth. Fuck knows why. But here's the website. Looks dull as fuck. Yeah, but you'd be speaking on a panel, give your views from a younger point of view, because actually I'm going bald. Look, and then I sent Justin, who's part of this production called Wildlife FM, a picture of my bald spot that's coming on. I'm upset about it. Justin didn't really understand my issues, and he sent me a crying with laughter face. So I said, well, what about this panel? You know, is it # compensated? He said, I don't know. I doubt it. I can ask. Normally these kind of things aren't. And I sent him a sad face and a crying face. Justin didn't respond to that, so a couple of days later I said, look, sorry to hassle you, but I kind of need a yes or no on the panel thing. Meghan might do it. What do you think? No, soz. So then I sent Justin another picture of the start of my bald patch. That one there. And another one as well. I sent him that one and that one. Stop sending me pictures of your bald patch, Justin said. So that's why we got Mikey to be on this panel instead. But I think now Jasmine's got a question for Meghan.
Yes. So now that we've gotten an overview of the global youth privacy landscape, we'd love to hear from Meghan and Mikey about how young people themselves feel about their privacy. So Meghan and Mikey, welcome.
Hiya.
Hello. So I just wanted to start off with asking, what is privacy to you? When you hear the word privacy, what does it bring to mind? Are there any conversations or anecdotes that you'd like to share in your discussions about privacy as a young person?
Sure. It's really interesting. Only last week I was actually having a chat with my boyfriend about privacy, totally not related to this conference. And we were talking about some of the new things going on with Instagram in terms of, my boyfriend just said to me, oh, can they see everything that we're doing? And quite honestly, I don't know. And that's a little bit scary because you don't know who is sort of looking at the things that you're doing. And yeah.
Yeah, Mikey, do you have thoughts on what privacy means to you?
I can actually comment on that because a while ago, right, I saw a meme and it was of this mug that looked like a lot like a mushroom, and I was like, wow, I really need this mushroom mug, right? So I Google it, as you do when you want to know where to find something. So I Google this mushroom mug. They only sell it for $8 in America, so I can now never have it, and that's very sad. But for the next week, every ad I got on Instagram was mushroom themes. Like every single ad was mushroom themed, and none of them were the mushroom mug either. So it was quite awful. But that does pose the question of how much of our stuff do they actually see? It's kind of weird.
Yeah. I'm thinking if I can get my hands on that mushroom mug, I'm going to send it to you. You might
Please,
find it in
honestly.
the mail one day. Yes. So another question that Amelia answered a second ago about age. What age do you think you should be before you can provide informed, meaningful consent for the collection and use of your personal data? And related, what does consent mean to you? This is a word that's thrown around in conversations about privacy all the time, but what does consent really mean to you?
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting. I think in terms of what age, when I was younger, I'd have been like, oh, it should be now, because I wanted to be able to do all of the things that I could do. For example, in terms of like getting Facebook, my parents didn't allow me to get it until I was 13, but I was so desperate to have it. But now, honestly, I don't think I would, in terms of like my own children, eventually, I don't think I would let them do all the things online that I did as a young person, just because you don't really know who's watching, and you just need to be really careful. And in terms of what does consent mean to me, I think it needs to be explicitly asked. It can't be assumed.
Yeah. And I believe we have a video that's playing. Perhaps not. Mikey, do you have a response to that question as well in terms of what does consent mean to you and how old do you think you should be before you can provide?
My parents, one of those parents who like sort of got every single one of their kids a computer so that, you know, they wouldn't have to deal with taking us to after school clubs and stuff. I grew up on Omegle and Kick Chats. I grew up with social media from the age of 9, and honestly, I kind of thing on anyone. Terrible, absolutely terrible. As a child, you do not understand what you're doing on the internet. It just feels like a playground. The amount of like interactions I had as a kid with like adults and like fully grown, like people who I didn't even realize, like in retrospect, it was actually kind of odd. I don't think as a child I understood that I was doing anything that like was strange, because to me I was just, oh, I was on the internet, everyone's on the internet. But I don't think, so long as they can't understand exactly what they're consenting to and what data is being shared, I don't think a child can consent to their data being shared. And I don't think young kids do understand what they're sharing. My brother certainly doesn't. He's what, 14? He clicks anything just to get the screen off. Like, you get those little pop-ups, he'll press accept to everything. Just because he knows if he pressed the big green button, it goes away. But yeah, I honestly, like, don't think young kids really know what they're doing.
Yeah. So another question is, how do you decide what information you choose to share or not share online? What is that vetting process about what you will post on social media or what information you'll add in forums, whatever it may be with your personal information? How do you decide what to share and what not to share online?
I think a really useful way of sort of looking at it in terms of how I was taught at school is, would you want like your nan to be able to see the things that you're posting, you know? So I think about in terms of the sort of image that I am creating of myself online. I know in recent years I use my platforms on social media to talk a lot about mental health awareness and to talk about things that I'm really passionate about. But in terms of what information would I choose to share or not share online, I think, as I said before, it's really important that you're constantly sort of reviewing your consent and thinking about the kind of things that you are sharing online, and not just sharing them because you can.
Yeah. Mikey, do you have? Yeah, I'm sure you have thoughts as well. I'd love to hear them.
Well, in recent years, I've kind of slowly been dropping myself off the internet. In the UK, well, specifically in London, we have a huge thing about online, like young people on like online platforms. We've had the same guy, this one guy called Noah, since like I think 2014. I've seen him on Instagram, and he'd do like meetups in London. So like these online things would become physical, real things. It was based off like some YouTube meetup stuff that used to happen way back in like the late 2000, like before 2010. Like there used to be like meetups that YouTubers used to do, and from that, like a lot of kids my age who were also on the internet really young just learned to sort of smother their entire lives, like just spread it all over the internet, like just for the sake of it, like you can say something, so say it kind of thing. And in recent years, I think a lot of the people who did that young have started to realize exactly how little they understood of how, you know, permanent the internet is, how many people remember
I think
you.
you're so right.
Yeah, it's terrible. Like the same guy that I speak of, like he's completely like rebranded himself. Everyone still remembers him from a song he wrote about Donald Trump in 2015. Like everyone still remembers what he did, 5-6 years ago. And that's really like weird. Like going viral young, you really don't understand what it is. And being on the internet so young with like public accounts, you have a chance of either becoming viral, really annoying people who then have like a personal vendetta against you. And it's honestly, at this point, I decide to share online basically anything that isn't actually related to my personal life, so that no one knows anything about me other than what I look like. I gave up. I'm really like, after seeing a lot of the people on the internet that I did grow up, I've just decided that growing up online isn't a spotlight that anyone would actually what it entailed.
Yeah, no, that is so thoughtful. I think now we're going to see a short clip. I believe we have a video of a song, Meghan, that you wrote and performed. Could we play that now?
I love you, GDPR. Come and take my hand. When I am inside you, we can dance to a promised land. I love you, GDPR. Protect the vital data. I want you, GDPR. Sooner rather than later. Identify an individual, find a way to make it lyrical. Are you processing data fairly? Don't confuse me with your jargon vocabulary. Competent children under contracts. How can we all interact? Unauthorized parties have access. Might need a fact check. We are transparent. We are open and honest. Oh. We do not deceive or mislead. I love you, GDPR. Whisper in my ear. I want you, GDPR. With you I feel no fear. I love you, GDPR. Please, please, please hold my hand. Please bend over, GDPR. I must check your prostate gland.
Wonderful. Wow, Meghan, you have such a beautiful voice and just been mesmerized. Yes. But how did you come to write this song? And could you share a little bit about animations and what you were thinking with this song?
So I initially looked at all of the stuff that's on the GDPR website. and I like physically lifted stuff verbatim, sort of the things that are said in there. And then Kim helped me along the way. You know, it's just it was just it became something very beautiful.
Yeah, it really did. But I think anything you sing would also just be so beautiful. So yes. Yeah, so now we're going to see a short clip from Kim Noble's work and engage in a discussion about his philosophy on privacy or privacy. So Kim, would you like to introduce the video? Sorry, just 1 second.
Not really, but you can just play it.
Yes.
Because to be honest, I'm not sure why I'm here. I can understand why everyone else is here, but I can't understand why I'm here. So lots of my work sort of transgresses privacy issues. This was a project I did in B&Q. I dressed up as a B&Q member of staff. I got the apron printed up. This is B&Q is a DIY store in the UK, and I put hidden cameras around the store, and I worked there for you know, like
those little swing bits. Have you?
Tell me where your buttoning nets are located.
I know it sounds bad, but I really don't give a shit.
I find it strange that I'm on this panel, yet my work is about kind of transgressing those privacy issues, if that makes sense. The reason I'm here is because I worked on a young people's project called Wildlife FM, and I often think that some of the sort of best art or best conversations we can have come from sort of private and intimate moments. If you think of the best works of art, they're often kind of sort of very quiet or private things that are then exposed, and part of what I do is you know, exposing my private moments or other people's private moments. So this show called Wildlife FM, which was working with young people, was kind of a challenge to that, because obviously young people need protecting, but at the same time it was my job to kind of draw out stuff from the youngsters. I think that's me done.
Yes. So I have a short clip from Wildlife FM that if you can share my screen, I can play.
So you're doing a show for young people?
Yeah, we're all singer-songwriters. We just want to find out what like topics you think would be included in the show.
Identity, politics of identity.
Yeah.
Sexuality.
Yeah.
Gender.
Yeah.
I would say the political disenfranchisement of the young.
Yeah.
Impact of austerity. Mm-hmm. The cuts to education maintenance allowance. Mm-hmm. The advent of tuition fees. The cuts in housing benefit for the under 25s.
It's harder and higher and stronger as I suddenly began to feel small.
While we connect you to an agent. Crime Stoppers.
Hi, I'm Meghan. I'm in Amsterdam right now and I didn't know who to call. We're on stage right now and there's a man in the second row, third row, who's looking at us. There are a lot of people looking at us. And I didn't really know. I want you to fuck me. I want you to fuck me.
Oh, it's taking me back.
Yes, wow, that's amazing. So Meghan and Mikey, how did you learn about and come to be a part of Wildlife FM?
So I was actually part of some scratch performances before Wildlife ever became a show. So I was originally part of the show age 15 and I'm now 21. So it's been a long old process. Yeah, it was my English teacher actually saw an advertisement for it and was like, hey, I think you'd be really good for this. And I was like, oh, thanks, sir. And I went and looked it up online and the website looked really dodgy. And I was like, not sure about it. And then I auditioned and yeah, the rest is history.
Oh, wonderful. And Mikey, how did you come to be a part of Wildlife FM?
Tell the truth, Mikey.
Oh my God. Okay, so going back to like my whole weird interactions with the internet, it was 3 a.m. and I saw a Facebook ad, and it was for the next day. And I'm one of those people that I will befriend someone on the train, and they will become my best friend, and I'll probably hang out with them on that day and be like, "Yeah, I've made a new friend today, guys." Very bad in today's climate. Was perfectly fine 4 years ago, but so I go to London Bridge, and I do this audition. And then my parents take me to Africa for like 3 months. Long story, but I get a call saying, "You're not part of this. We don't want you." Not like that, but like it felt like that. And then a bit later, they sort of like start contacting me again, and they're just like, "I'm so sorry. We're so sorry. We want you now. We really want you to be part of this thing." And it was really weird, massive ego boost, and to this day, apparently no one knows how old I am. I started the show not on the first one, but the next, like the London one, which was kind of like really cool. I was 15 at the time. I had to be chaperoned, which is a cool thing about like child protection. They make you chaperone kids when you live in London. But yeah, that's how I became part of it. Just sort of got kicked out and then back in. Just like say, Kim.
Was that difficult though? That because that's one of the questions I had for you guys, was these kind of privacy issues. I know it was a kind of different context, but did you? I found some of the issues that we had to protect younger people actually quite restrictive, and especially for you, it felt like, wow, we were kind of undermining you as people by putting these kind of weird rules on top of you and saying you can't do this, you can do that.
It was mainly because of the borough I lived in, because if you remember, Tinette didn't have to do any of that. It was just me because of where I lived in London. That borough, specific borough, decided that like young performers had to be chaperoned until they were 16, but they still made me get chaperoned when I was 16. It was quite annoying. I didn't like it simply because I'm someone who, as I said, was all over the internet, all over London from like a really young age. So suddenly I was being like monitored and like driven home and walks to the train station and walks to my front door. I felt like I was being taken to my first day of school in year 1. Like it was terrible.
No,
like,
that's
I didn't have space to breathe.
No, that's so interesting, because I actually really appreciated having a chaperone there, because that was like my first time properly in London on my own. And so even though I was 18, like I'd never really been to London before. And so having a chaperone there, it was really nice to be able to just like ask them questions, and they were like basically like my resident mum.
I think it's a lot better when you don't know the area. But like when you already know it, like back of your hand, like most kids in London know their way around London. So like chaperoning for like London kids, because it's so accessible, it's so easy, like the public transportation, every kid knows how to take it, every kid knows how to hack it, so it gets kind of like strange when suddenly we're being babied in a way we've never been babied before.
I wonder whether that some
did that go ahead.
I'm not,
go ahead.
I'm not the person in charge.
We've lost Kim. But I was just curious if you
Kim,
felt
where have you gone? You can't just leave me here.
Dynamics. If you felt similar dynamics in the creative or collaborative process. So in addition to when you were coming to and leaving sort of rehearsals and things like that, in the actual process, did you feel like there were different considerations that needed to take place because you were a young person who was a part of a... Yeah, no, I'd love to hear about it.
I think some of the, in terms of wildlife, it was definitely one of the, it's been one of the best projects I've ever been part of, firstly. And I really enjoyed it. Still enjoy it to this day, hence why I'm here. I think in terms of sort of it was kind of broaching on some quite difficult subjects amongst youth. And I think in terms of, as you saw at the end of the song, "I Want You to Fuck Me," you know, it's quite jarring for the audience to see sort of a young girl on stage asking you to fuck her. I mean, that's weird, but also it's great because it's showing that we should be able to talk about these kind of things in theatre, and that we can make theatre that's different, and it doesn't matter how old you are.
Yeah, definitely. So Kim, I had a question for you about, what?
Cut to market.
Yes. Yeah. Mickey, did you have anything to add about sort of what that creative collaborative process looked like? You don't have to have an answer. We can also keep going. Yeah. So I guess, Kim, what were some of the considerations that you had to take into account in your efforts to respectfully and effectively share these youth experiences and perspectives? What sort of was going through your mind when you were thinking about how do I authentically share Meghan and Mikey's experience as part of this production?
Well, I suppose it's slightly, we're in a slightly more fortunate position than maybe what Amelia and Sonia are talking about, where we are in a kind of, it is an artifice. We are making something that is manipulated. We can, not everything you see on stage or in theatre or on a canvas or in a video is what is truth there. So we were able to take difficult stories and maybe give them to somebody else, which you can't necessarily do in real life on a mobile phone, I suppose. But so we battled with the rules, and we were sort of undermined a lot by them, but also we knew they were there for an important reason. But yeah, I suppose that was how we managed it, by pretend, do you know what I mean? By having things that were real, that song that Meghan's just sung was initially written with somebody else, do you know what I mean? So it wasn't all coming, the voice you heard wasn't necessarily the voice that was presenting that issue, maybe.
Yeah, and for our audience, do you have advice for policymakers, researchers, or others who are seeking to incorporate and amplify youth voices in youth privacy policy? So what were sort of some of the questions that you had to ask yourself, or what were some of the strategies that you used to, in this artifice of the production, but still in this way of interacting and really trying to draw out these youth voices? What is some advice that you have for our audience?
If I can just jump in, Kim. I think one of the main things about Wildlife was that it was such a collaborative process. Like, it wasn't just Kim writing things for us. We were working together. And I think in terms of creating privacy policies, it's so important that young people are involved in writing these policies, because how can you write policies about somebody who hasn't had an input? It's impossible to be able to understand how it is to be a child growing up in this age if you haven't actually asked them for their opinion.
Is that happening? Can I ask?
Yeah.
To Sonia or Amelia.
Yes, absolutely. People are asking, lots of consultation is going on with young people, and that's something I'm going to talk about a bit. The problem is whether the policymakers are listening to what the young people say. So there's lots of kind of, NGOs and organisations, child rights organisations doing those consultations. We just need to make sure that the policymakers are listening. That's part of what this panel is about.
Yes, and that is a perfect segue into my next question, which is, now that we've heard from Meghan and Mikey and Kim, Sonia, could you share more from your research on what young people think about privacy, and what do young people say they want when it comes to their privacy? I know this is a question that you have spent a lot of time working on, and you've spoken to a ton of young people and their parents, and so we'd love to gain some insights from your work.
Yeah, thank you, Jasmine. I'm delighted. So one of the things I've spent the last year doing is working with the UN Committee on the Rights of the Child, with the Five Rights Foundation and others, to try to kind of say, what do children's rights look like in a digital world? And one of those rights is the right to privacy. I was reflecting that this panel is actually called Global Youth Voices, and I thought I might just give you some of the comments that young people said to us in the consultation we did with them. So this was led by Amanda Third at the University of Western Sydney, and we consulted over 700 children and young people in 27 different countries, and they they have a lot to say about these issues. So just some examples, like I wish I had, I should have given these to Meghan and Mikey and they could have acted them or done something crazy with them. But I'll just tell you what they said. So a 13-year-old girl in Nepal said, nowadays in the digital era, people are losing their personal privacy. A 14-year-old boy in Canada said, you should not completely trust big companies because they'll sell your information. A girl in the Philippines says, I can use social media for free, but that doesn't mean that the companies should be able to use my data for free. My personal data is still my privacy. A young person in Ghana said, I need to know more about all of this, but I don't have any teachers who can tell me it. A girl in New Zealand, age 16, said, I want to change the laws so that companies don't have the power to use and share people's personal information without their permission. And a girl in Pakistan, age 12, is really worried about cybercrime and identity theft when people get hold of the data and her information that she didn't give them permission for. So, there's a lot of concern from young people in lots of different parts of the world. And what I would like to kind of add into this conversation really from my research is to suggest that we're talking about 3 different kinds of privacy. So we're talking about privacy from the people we know, like our friends and our parents. I think that's a lot of what Meghan was talking about, and we're talking that we can also be talking about privacy from school or police or government, like institutions, what they know about us. And then I think we're also talking about privacy from businesses, like advertisers and all those people who kind of collect and sell and trade your information. And what I notice in our conversation is that we do spend a lot of time thinking about the things that can go wrong with our privacy, and not so much about why we want privacy, what it's for. I think some of Kim's kind of play in the shops and offices kind of challenges people to think, why do they want this privacy? And what young people say, and I think Mikey really spoke to this as well, is privacy means agency, it means dignity, it's opportunities for identity. When we have privacy, we kind of feel we have the freedom to think and decide for ourselves. And what I've noticed talking to young people is Cambridge Analytica was like a wake-up call for everybody. And I've had discussions with like 11-year-olds about what happened in Cambridge Analytica. And a wake-up call in which everyone realized it's more than what do your friends see or what does a stranger see about you, but it's all those kind of companies and businesses that are, whose very business model is to collect data. And as lots of young people told me, that may be their business model, but it's still, my life is still none of their business. They should. And I think maybe kind of, something I wanted to also add in the conversation is I think it's not just what do young people understand and what choices they make and what do they want to change, but there's also how adult society is responding. And I think we are giving young people some very peculiar and problematic messages. So I think we do, as an adult society, keep telling, in the interpersonal realm between us and our friends or family or neighbours, privacy means having control over what others know about you, like Meghan and Mikey illustrated. But we don't really have that control in the digital world. And in relation to school, for example, young people don't think they have control over the records that school keeps about them, but they trust the school to do the right thing, or they trust their doctor or the health service more or less to do the right thing with that data. So we kind of teach children they should be able to have control and they can trust those who are collecting the data about them. And then in the commercial domain, that just doesn't hold. That just doesn't work. They don't have any control. Like Mikey said, you know, his little brother is just given choices which are meaningless, because if he doesn't say yes, he can't get the service. So of course he says yes. It's not a real choice. It's a fake choice. So we teach kids that they don't have control, really. We say, services say they'll delete their data, but then actually their data's kept. Or they say, you know, you have the choice, just read the terms and conditions, but no one can understand the terms and conditions, and so on. So you know, young people are operating and giving away their data like the rest of us in a commercial world that actually gives them really no control over their privacy at all. And then, you know, as Meghan's song beautifully illustrated in relation to GDPR, so we've got this new data protection regulation, but it wasn't designed to solve all of those problems that we're talking about. It wasn't designed to kind of stop people being bullied or by a school online or approached by strangers who are going to, you know, kind of exploit children, whatever. It's designed to control, you know, and protect data. And so we do need it to be more effective, but we also need to recognize some of the limits of what data protection can do and think about other kinds of regulation and some of the other things that young people are saying. So maybe schools shouldn't be allowed to make contracts with businesses that mean the business gets their data in exchange for kind of managing the school's data collection. Or, you know, maybe I work in a university, maybe universities shouldn't be allowed to look at young people's social media before deciding whether to give them a place. You know, we can regulate universities. This is kind of beyond data protection. I think there's more we could be doing. And then, you know, as Kim just said really eloquently, we have to have a debate about what privacy is for and why it's so important in a digital world, and young people have got to be included in that debate. So that's, you know, I'm really delighted that we're having this session today, and thank you for including me.
Dear Mark Zuckerberg, this is a picture of me on my friend's Instagram account. I come from a big family. Size-wise, we aren't overweight, apart from my brother Steve. Steve didn't want me to show this picture, so I pixelated out some faces for privacy's sake. He'll be the first of us to die, probably. I have 5 siblings. London houses aren't that big, Mark, so we shared rooms and clothes and toys and books. If someone was upset, it was a shared experience. Like when I was 12 and I got detention for never doing homework. It belongs to all of us. It was everyone's detention. I didn't really have privacy growing up. It wasn't a thing. Nothing I did could ever just be for me. It belongs to everyone. I was just everyone. Myself as an individual, sole, singular entity, person, thing didn't officially exist until I got my own room. I was at the top floor, above everyone, and next to the bathroom. It was incredible. Space, just for me, on my own. I had a lock on my door. It didn't lock, but it symbolized something. Probably something. Do you have a lock on your door, Mark? It had one of those generic, boring keys you see everywhere, and I put it on a lanyard so that I wouldn't lose it. And then I lost it, and we had to break the door down. If the lock could speak, I'm sure it would have told me something profound, some important life lesson. For this bit, I'll be playing myself, and I'll also be playing part of the lock, so please bear with my funny voices. Hi, lock. What do you symbolize in my life? Because you meant a lot to me. No idea. Security, maybe? That's too much of a cliche. I'd rather you epitomize something beyond the representational. Well, walking into my room was like putting myself in my own little bubble. I was free to express myself, Unmasked, with as much privacy as one could hope for, I was able to be myself without sharing. It had this big window that looked out, down onto my neighbour's gardens and the roads behind it. Leaving my room wasn't something I did often. It burst a bubble, shattering my illusion. I felt like a spaceman leaving his ship, stepping through an airlock into a maelstrom of shit and noise and human traffic. Walking directly into a wall of other people's questions, other people demanding stuff from me. Like, what you doing? Or, where you going? When will you be back? Or, how old are you? How can you be expected to give an answer if you don't know the answer yourself? Or, I don't know where I'm going. All I know for sure is, I am going. Cogito ergo sum, I think, therefore I am going somewhere. I just like wandering around on my own. I bet you do too, Mark. On your phone, with a mask on, and earphones in, so that no one could approach you, even if they wanted to. I hate being approached and watched. Even this panel was a stretch. Nothing goes unnoticed or unobserved. Like, do you remember when that toddler tripped over at the crossing and ate concrete? You saw that. And you know when you're sitting on the bus and you watch someone run up and still miss it and they're banging on the bus door shouting, wait, stop, wait, and the driver's still driving away? Yeah, you saw that too, and everyone in the bus saw that too, and the person who was running probably felt very embarrassed. You're always being perceived, be it in real life or in your little airlock bubbles or online. Like, you think your little online journal wasn't read by someone, you think your cringy tween-age posts on your public Instagram meme page group account was only viewed by your friends. The router knows exactly what you're looking up on incognito mode. I want to be that default blank silhouette profile picture when you make a new account. The grey one. I want to be that in real life. I want that kind of anonymity. A private account with no one on it but thousands of posts. No one knowing what it is but me. I want to choose what information others get to have of me. I don't want to be perceived against my knowledge, especially if it's not from that picture of me. So I'd really like if you could take it down or something. All my love, Mikey. I hope he reads my letter.
He will.
Yes. Yes, he might be watching this panel at the moment, and he got the letter, so we'll see. Yeah, but I also wanted to share that Mikey, you made all of those illustrations that were in the video, and it's so talented.
I did.
Talent. Didn't you?
Thank you.
Oh, okay. Yes, yes. But I mentioned at the beginning of the panel that the intent is really to bring young people and our youth privacy experts together for a conversation. So now we're going to create space for our panelists to engage in a dialogue and ask questions to each other. So does anyone want to start? There are a lot of very thought-provoking things that we just teased and then didn't get to fully flesh out. So I'm looking forward to this opportunity for you to be able to ask each other questions.
So maybe I can ask Mikey something, because I just I loved what you just did, what you just shared with us, and I was really intrigued by what you said early on about how we all know everything about each other in our kind of circle. So there's a sense in which we can, your privacy is your uncle's privacy or your brother's privacy. And I just wonder, because in a way you're saying your privacy is your own, but you're also saying we're all connected to each other. And I think that's something we really struggle with. And I just loved your insight. I don't know if you wanted to add anything about how we all affect each other's, we all share about other people without even realizing it, maybe.
I mean, everyone has an impact and an influence on everyone else. My entire kind of idea is that even the people that I walk past on the street, like, you know, when you walk like opposite ways in the street and you nearly like run into someone, you do that little shifty thing because you're trying to get around each other. That's something you think about afterwards. Like after that, you're kind of like, wow, that was weird. Wow, that was awkward. You know, it takes up your time, which means that maybe you're like a second late for something. Maybe you missed one of the trains, kind of thing. I also just kind of believe that I am everyone I've known and everyone I will know. Like a lot of the things I say, a lot of my mannerisms, a lot of my behavior comes not only from my family, but from my friends, you know, from people that I knew when I was like young, people that I spoke to when I was maybe 6 years old. Like my year 2 teacher had as much impact on me as my like closest friends do now. Like, and it's really weird to think of how much people impact and influence each other. I think about it a lot, like a lot.
Yeah, I think it's a really, really great point. Yeah, thank you.
Where does, because this is all quite new, right? Is this all quite new? This kind of obviously, right?
Yeah.
What's the worst case? What's worst case scenario in sort of like 20 years time, 40 years time then?
So I think the thing we really don't know is what is it like to grow up where you're being watched the whole time and data is collected about you the whole time, and so you get used to it. It's like, you know, it's like Mikey would never have that room to go to. Everything is getting cameras, you know, watching us everywhere. I think we just don't know because we're so used to the idea that we can go offline and we can become that anonymous person, but that's under threat. I mean, some of us already live in Britain where, you know, they tell us we have the most CCTV of any country in the world, right? And we forget about it. So we get used to always being watched, and I think we just don't know. I grew up invisible.
What I hear a lot, and I think it is probably, I think one of the most important considerations that, you know, a lot of privacy advocates and policymakers are trying to prevent is how do you make sure that opportunities aren't taken away? How do you make sure that that thing that you post on Instagram when you're 10 or 12 or 15 doesn't impact your opportunities for higher education or a job? Or should it? You know, as the conversation in the US in particular recently illustrates, you know, if there's, you know, a racist sentiment or something expressed, how much should that reflect on you when we know that your brain is still developing and you're perhaps more susceptible to peer pressure? And so there's a lot of questions now because there is often a record of that, for better or worse. I think I was sort of at the tail end growing up of the generation where I didn't really have internet access until I was probably 10 or so, and then it was definitely like AOL dial-up. But there's a record of, you know, Live Journal and Dead Journal and Tumblr and all the things that started popping up at that point. How do those things impact you? How does what changes in how other people perceive you, and do you know that it's happening? And I think trying to solve for that problem is something that we've seen policymakers focus on quite a bit.
And it's big business. I mean, all of that data, you know, your Live Journal, you know, what kind of Mikey used to put on Instagram, this is like someone is making money out of all of this, and they don't consult you, they don't come back to you, they don't, you know, so what are they doing with it? We just don't know as well. But, you know, they're serving their interests, and maybe their interests are not your interests, and they're shaping the world that then you're in. I mean, one of the questions I'd like to ask Meghan, thinking about your ode to GDPR, which I really was just so haunting, is like, I don't think we give enough thought to when something goes wrong, where do you want to go? You know, who should put it right? Do young people feel they know I can call this number, or I can go to this, website, and we can write.
That's really interesting. Honestly, I don't know. I don't know.
So it's incredibly disempowering, because you kind of know stuff is happening. You don't know who to ask, and you can write to Mark Zuckerberg. I regret to say I don't think you're going to get an answer, Mikey.
Yeah, well, as I said, I've had a conversation with my boyfriend about privacy, but at the end of the day, I'm not going to stop using Instagram, because that's the main platform that I use. Over the years I've used Facebook, Snapchat, and I actually don't really use Facebook or Snapchat anymore, because I'm trying to sort of limit my time on social media and trying to put my energy elsewhere. But Instagram isn't something that I'm just going to drop, because but in terms of sort of the mental health awareness community that I'm hoping to sort of build from it, that it's important to me, and it's not something that I'm just going to stop doing.
Looks like we have 2 minutes left for our panel. So if there's one last question that anyone would like to ask.
I think would love Meghan and Mikey to. I think, Meghan, you're bringing up a really interesting point, that there's sort of, these positives that often come out of the use of these platforms that compensate for, some of the privacy violations here. What do you think is the right balance there? What do you think is fair for companies or for government to know about you and worth sort of being on those platforms? No, that's a
very good question. I think in terms of when our data is being used, I think similar to one of the quotes that was given to us earlier from one of the children about sort of, I want to be able to use these platforms for free without my data being given away. And so perhaps in terms of what can be done next, perhaps a money incentive does need to be provided, but equally then that's then not accessible for everybody. So I'm not really sure what the answer necessarily is, because I think young people are going to continue to use these platforms whether their data is being used or not. And some people are blissfully unaware of how their data is being used, and then some of us are aware and don't really know how else to do it, and other people actually remove themselves from social media and the internet altogether, which is actually quite sad.
Thank you all so much. Unfortunately, we've reached the end of our time for this panel. I know we could go on for much longer. There's just so many more questions I know that I want to ask everyone. So Kim, take a picture, yay! But yes, I just wanted to thank everyone, Meghan, Mikey, Kim, Sonia, Amelia, for joining us on this panel. And thank you so much for your insights, your thoughtfulness, your humility, your honesty, your vulnerability in being able to share your thoughts. And so, yeah, I just wanted to I'm sure the audience members are also clapping and
are there audience members?
Yeah, I think they're actually here.
Well, I have no idea either. Perhaps not. It was just a conversation with us, which is also super valuable. So yes, thank you all so very much. And for anyone in the audience, if you're in the audience, we hope you enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.